Alright, part one of learning the handstand was all about why we do what we do and sort of developing understanding. Part two will be about the physical preparation side of learning how to handstand and the drills that you can use to develop the ability to stand in your hands. The reason why I think it's a great thing to learn how to do is because it kind of gives you freedom to enjoy physical movement kind of anywhere you go almost, especially once you're pretty advanced. You can train wherever you like. As a beginner, you're sort of limited to needing a wall and sometimes the odd bit of equipment like a bar to hang from or whatever, but none of them are kind of necessary. People will say, I have a friend that learned to just kick up a few times at the end of the session and they slowly got longer and longer. I think that's definitely a possibility. But when you think about what I explained in the first video about how we learn to handstand and what the physical requirements are, just kicking up from time to time a few times a week isn't going to spend enough time providing stimulus for the average person to learn to handstand in a decent amount of time. I have no doubt that the very physically sort of talented or those that have been exposed to gymnastics that have good sort of ability there in their hands and their shoulders that may not have actually had a decent handstand before may learn quite quickly. However, I think for the average person it's not a wise way to try and learn. So I think investing in a board to learn to stand on is good. Just keeps the surface the same no matter where you're at. Can be put against a wall, can be used as a sort of marker for keeping your hand the same width, the surface looks the same, etc, etc. You can draw a little dot to keep your eyes on, but by no means a necessity. I just think it can be a good idea. Let's start with some drills on the wall. I'm not going to cover any specific warm-up today because it just takes too long to sort of cover everything. I will say spending a decent amount of time warming up your wrists and developing the ability to sort of extend your hands to 90 degrees is pretty important, and depending on what your shoulders are like, you may want to spend some time sort of hanging and stretching your shoulders out. First priority is being able to just kick up to the wall. I think good thing here is using a board so that you know your hands are always sort of roughly in the middle of the board, or using some kind of physical marker. So maybe putting your foot against the wall and then putting your fingertips where the end of your foot was, and you know that you always work on your kick up the same distance from the wall. So if we go from there, we're here and we try and keep our legs split and touch one leg to the wall and then the other one. If you bring that second leg up too quickly, you'll pretty much always fall short. So you actually want to keep split as much as possible. That's where you'll start to see a bit of flexibility helping you out. What you can do if you're very tight and that is a little bit too difficult is you can try bending your legs a touch. And then practice keeping your legs straight on the way down. Just tie my shoelaces quickly. As you can see, that made it a little bit easier. It's a sort of shorter lever for you to have to overcome. If you find that when you kick up like that you don't have the strength, you're probably going to need to work on your shoulder strength a little bit more. So that's when you would instead start your hands out at some distance, put your feet on the wall. You come in as close as you're comfortable to start off with, push up nice and high, try and keep your shoulders right up near your ears and jaw, hold it, and come down. Sorry, my face is a little bit red, I haven't warmed up at all, so it tends to make me go a bit beetrooty. What you'll find with that is over time your angle will start, say 45 degrees, and you'll slowly come in until you're right in close to the wall. At the point where you're kind of on this board, a reasonable distance from the wall, you should find that you're able to kick up again. So for a beginner that can't kick up, a lot of your training is just going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, doing a few sets of those longer sort of hollow holds, and then building the time up and getting in close to the wall. Say we can kick up. I like people to start with their hands on the ground like this, rather than going from up high. What you'll tend to see is when you go from up high, you will sometimes turn your hands out and put them a little bit too wide. What this does is it doesn't give us very much to push with when we go into overbalance. Our fingers aren't balancing us very efficiently, so having them a little bit closer and facing forwards. I like either index finger or middle finger pointing forwards. Anything more in is a little bit too internally rotated. Anything turned out starts to take away the ability for all of your fingers and your thumb to balance. So Put it down, make sure you're pointing forward with either your middle or your index. I use my middle finger. From here, kick up, one foot on, bring the other foot. Now, this is called a heel pull. I'm going to take my head and arch a little bit so that I'm looking slightly in front of my fingers, and then switch my fingers on so my feet pull off the wall together, switch them off so they fall back to the wall. If it's too difficult, you might need to banana a little bit more. This feels weird for me. Initially just using your hands like a switch and turning on and off is what we go for. And the same deal goes when I show you a toe pull in a minute. We just turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off, and we build up reps. I find that generally building up 10 reps is enough for people to start understanding changing that switch into a dial. So you start balancing as much as you need, and you come off and you do a little bit of time, and then you fall back to the wall. My sort of goals I set for people are generally to start off with 10 reps of on and off, and then 3 sets of 3 to 5 seconds. Just balancing for that 3 to 5 seconds is going to take a lot of concentration. And then moving on to trying to hit 10 seconds for 1 rep and pushing that out to 30 seconds. Once both sides of your toe and heel pull are 30 seconds, you're generally ready to start moving away from the wall into the middle of the room and start doing some balancing away from the wall. So, a toe pull, we have to go the other way. Get onto the wall, how it works for you. Get your hands in the middle of the board. Now, my sort of cues I like to give are first nose in front of fingers, and then back. Nose in front of fingers, then back. My feet never separate. You can also do a bit of nose forward and a bit of bum out, and then back to the wall. So I've just been doing on and off. We would then start to go do time. When you're doing the time, you may find that you actually start pushing up a little bit and doing your balancing in a better handstand before you get back to the wall. And then we start to do time for just the 1 rep rather than doing lots of short ones. So that's our 2 sort of main functions of learning to balance. Your other big one that you're going to do a lot of is your stomach to wall hold. If you're using the board, put it right in close to the wall, and you want to be getting in as close as possible. This just builds up the ability for our shoulders to tolerate being in this position for a long period of time, and that to not be the limiting factor in balancing. So, same deal as how we got into our toe pull, except you just walk right in close. So from here, and I'm trying to just keep my toes touching, pushing really high so that my chest and stomach aren't resting on the wall. The other option is, you can sit a little bit further out, but flex your feet, and it will help your shoulders sit on top of your hands. A word of warning. I'm going to sit down for a little bit now. As a beginner, you are likely to experience some problems in learning to handstand. You're going to walk up to the wall and not know what to do with how to get down. Learning to do a bit of a cartwheel is your best bet. So if you cartwheel with your left hand forwards, you would tend to move your right hand off the wall. If you cartwheel with your right foot forwards, you tend to move your left hand off the wall. So becoming confident with cartwheeling is pretty helpful, I find. Otherwise, just putting some pillows out in front of you if you're learning at home, or some kind of soft mat can also be helpful. Unless you're one of those people that just knows how to sort of do a bit of a handstand forward roll, and you may find that okay. So the other thing is, you'll see as I came down, my legs sort of went a bit sideways. I'm pretty sure everyone has kicked something coming out of a handstand with not enough space. Either they knew there was no space there and they're just kind of pushing their limits a little bit. I've done that plenty of times, or they just weren't aware that their leg would go as far as it does. They are relatively long, versus what you sort of think they're going to be. So you can quite easily kick a toe. I've heard of a few people breaking a toe. It's possible. It's also possible as a beginner that you'll do too much too soon. I especially find this to be true of people being from very little physical background, or too much of like a risk trauma background. So someone that's involved in like hard physical labor work, someone that does boxing, somebody that was a gymnast and has taken 20 years off and their wrists are pretty beaten up. Any of those sort of things, getting back on your hands for a 1 hour handstand class that a lot of people do, can be a little bit too much. So I think you're better off as a beginner doing lots of short sessions. You're less likely to really overwork your wrists, and the muscles that we're training aren't kind of like your big like quads and chest and shoulders and that sort of thing, where we're trying to sort of break down and then rebuild. Your forearms don't go through that as much, especially early on. It's a bit more of just general understanding. So given there's no eccentric sort of stresses really in learning to handstand, yeah, you're not going to become as sore. So shorter, more frequent sessions can hopefully stop your wrists getting too beaten up. So we've gone through toe pulls, heel pulls, and stomach to wall. The goals for those: toe and heel pulls, reps on and off is your first thing until you get 10 reps, and then short holds for 3 sets in a set, so 3 mini sets, starting with 3 seconds and then building it up towards 10. Once you're able to balance your 10 seconds, then it's just one long set, and you're trying to go for that 30 seconds. The goals for stomach to wall, generally looking at 5 by 60 seconds with a few minutes rest in between. Handstands are skill as well as strength. They're not purely just strength. Obviously, say for a chin-up, you don't need a lot of time to rest before a chin-up, because you know that it's just up and down, not balancing your body. Your center of mass is going to hang under your hands. Learning to handstand is a little bit different. You need to be mentally sort of fresh. So I tend to not prescribe strict rest breaks for people. You just need to be feeling like you're ready to go, and everyone's going to have a little bit different capacity for that. So yeah, I find generally for most people, you've actually got to be a little bit lazier than you think with learning to handstand, and take longer rest breaks and really kind of visualize things, be mentally ready to go. Other sort of varieties of exercises you can do. We obviously know from the first video that we need to strengthen our hands to deal with overbalance. We need to strengthen our shoulders to deal with underbalance, or just to be able to support ourselves. And a little bit of core awareness, leg awareness, that sort of thing. So some other drills you can use are step off the wall. You can step off the wall in both directions. I've got 3 levels for this. So one is just one leg off, replace it, one leg off, replace it, and doing both sides. The other one is switching to the wall, and the other one is stepping off to handstand and then returning. So I'll do all 3 levels here. So kick up to the wall, I bring one leg off, start to really feel the handstand. First leg might get light on the wall, back to the wall, and then switch and do the same thing on this side. Might get light on the wall, so I've done both sides there. The next one is to go here, like that, and then the next one from there is to step to handstand. And the same thing can be done stomach to wall as well, so you can develop both sides. I don't think those drills are super important early on. I think you should just be doing heel pulls, toe pulls, stomach to wall, and a little bit of tuck that we'll cover next. Other than that, they're probably just a little bit of a change up to keep things interesting, because the journey can be slow and frustrating for some. Some people will get it pretty much immediately. I've had people come to classes, and as soon as they understand the how and why and do a few of the drills, they actually start balancing generally 5 to 10 seconds away from the wall. And while that isn't amazing, to be able to do that immediately is pretty cool. Some people, it'll take 2 years to get that 10 seconds away from the wall. So I think it's important to understand that before you undertake kind of this task. It's pretty easy to get disheartened when you see someone else doing what you've been spending 6 months to develop. They just do it immediately. So last one, tucking. I'll use my board. If I get my foot and I put it against the wall, I generally want my palm to sit where my toes end from the wall. This is just an average sort of lever that I like to use, because obviously everyone's got a foot that they can put against the wall, well, generally speaking. If you have very tight, what I call reactive shoulders, where you start tucking your shoulders want to close, you'll need to give yourself a touch more room. If you've got really good non-reactive shoulders, you may be a little bit closer because they'll stay open a bit easier, but that's a good general place to start. So my hands want to be in there. So I'll come in nice and close. Now this is a rough wall and it's not very nice to put my knees on, but generally you put your knees onto the wall and then you slide down as far as your shoulders will allow you to without breaking forward like that. So for me, I have a nice tuck, I can pull right down. However, you probably find a lot of people are going to sit kind of here, they'll want to go there, they'll want to go sideways. You don't want to do any of those things. You want to go from here, knees on, draw down and hold. Spend time in what I call the stop zone. As I explained earlier, the more weight goes outside your base of support in a two-arm handstand, especially in that over and under balance, and a tuck a lot in under balance, the heavier it becomes in our shoulders to stabilize. So that's strength training for us to hold a nice straight line. I find building up to 15 seconds in the deepest tuck you can and doing that for a few rounds tends to be pretty helpful. For a beginner, they are everything. The only thing that you really need to think about from that point on is building the comfort to kind of kick up away from the wall. Like I said earlier, with having something soft in front of you in case of you going over from the wall, same thing applies for away from the wall. Or if you've got somebody training with you, somebody that can spot, kicking up to their hands and using a little bit of spotting, you want people to spot you and not make you do the movement. So spotting is helping somebody where they need it. In this case, you shouldn't need much other than the prevention of kicking right over. Not somebody just to hold you and then put you in handstand, because you don't need that. You've already been doing that on the wall, really. So it's important to find somebody that's capable of just spotting you a little bit and helping you with the confidence and yeah, doing it away from the wall. Once you're able to do 10 seconds away from the wall, I would suggest that you start doing that. After doing these drills each session, you still need to stay on the wall and do more development there and hit all those sort of milestones I've covered. Once you get to 10 seconds though, it's time to start building up time and confidence away from the wall and start trying to go for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, doing 3 to 5 rounds of away from the wall holds. I say rounds of holds, and I don't really like saying you get 5 attempts, because on a bad day, your first 5 attempts could all be bad and you don't get any time. I think it's better to say less, but give yourself unlimited sets. So say you just went, all right, I just need to hit 2 by 15 seconds. That's all you need to get done for the day, rather than saying I've got 10 attempts where you could miss all 10. But that obviously depends on the individual and the time you have available. So stay on the wall until you're at that point of roughly a minute away from the wall. Once you're hitting a minute away from the wall, you're pretty sweet to kind of keep that on maintenance forever, and you're free to kind of be able to handstand wherever you want, or you can start moving towards other loftier goals.